All right. We are live in the new old studio.
Yeah,
It was always in my head for this to be the studio.
I like it. I like it. It's nice because it's air controlled.
Yeah. So you got to make sure that the house is at the right spot though, because it'll get warm if you're not.
That's
you know.
right.
But we are on two new journeys today.
Yes.
Number one, if you're watching from
Hello.
here,
I'm like, which camera do I look at?
we're attempting to go on YouTube as well.
You know, the funny thing is, I think that I think that my phone is still on ring. So if I get a text message, you guys may hear my phone ding in the background. Oh well.
So that's journey number one. We're gonna attempt to go on YouTube with only minimal glitches,
Yeah.
and then so thanks if you're attempting this journey along with us on the video settings.
Yes.
And then number two, as discussed in our last get together, we are gonna attempt
Yeah. Attempt is a good term.
to dive in, study, read, and just wade through might be the best language to use some of the minor prophets.
I feel kind of like it's going to be an axe head moment. The only reason we float is because God allows us to. Otherwise, we're just a bunch of lead weight.
So, and I told you this yesterday, we were on the phone talking about this and some other stuff, and I just said, okay, I've been reading through Hosea, which is where we're going to start.
Yes.
I've also been reading through Amos. And in full transparency to you and to the audience we do have that comes in and listens to us ramble, I went to Bible college. I don't think before this I have ever read the minor prophets outside of like Jonah. Is Jonah a minor prophet?
Yes, Jonah is a minor
I'm
prophet.
just making sure I'm right on that. Like, I really haven't. I've just gone,
Yeah.
I got Jesus,
Yeah.
and I've just skipped them.
The first time I ever went through the minor prophets and actually just finished it up was listening to Chuck Swindoll, his Old Testament masterworks, which I'm going to go to New Testament next and go
Yeah.
through that. But so it's so easy, and I think this is a good place to open up this morning. It's so easy to sit in church and go, well, the pastor knows those things, so I'm good to go. And maybe I might learn something. Maybe a Sunday school teacher thought it was worth
I
bringing
got
it
a good
out.
word.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I'm happy, you know. It's also on the same front easy when you get into seminary or a Bible college or anything to go, okay, this is stuff that I need to know. I'm trying to achieve it so I can get that piece of paper on the wall. And it becomes so academic, at that point that literally you're ingesting and throwing back up on a test, and then you walk away from it and you never think about it again.
I know.
And, you know, as I've told you before, which I think we're getting closer and closer and closer to a time period I'm going to be able to share a lot of stuff and just some excitement, you know, some things going on. It's the first time in my life I'm really watching God work in real time. And I think it's making me enjoy his word in real time.
Yeah. So separate circumstances, but I've really been enjoying reading through these and learning. And partly because it's new and fresh,
Right.
but also it is, I told you, what did I say? It's been like getting punched.
Yeah. Yeah. Sucker punch.
Yeah. Because I'm seeing myself, and maybe not to, you know, what we would call like the evil extent in some of these circumstances, right? But
Right.
but the point is still the same. Like,
Yeah.
you know, the point is really there going, Hosea saying, hey, Jared,
Yeah.
it not only is it you, but if you're not careful, you know, it could really be you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's been one of those, you know, it's not, you don't pick this up and go, I need a word to make me feel good today.
Well, and here's the thing. You've got three completely different men between Hosea, Joel, and Amos. Joel is the one in the middle, right? Yeah, okay. I'm making sure my brain's engaged this morning. So you've got those three guys, and you couldn't get any more different. I mean,
Right.
you've got one who's just kind of like an everyday Joe, but he happens to live in the area that he lives in, and we're going to get into the deep detail. You got one who's a sheep herder from Toccoa, and he's just like salt of the earth, pulls his dip can out, packs it in and starts preaching. I think back to when I was a kid. I mean, growing up where I grew up, man, like the deacons ran to see who could light the pastor's cigarette first, right? Because tobacco wasn't. Smoking was not against the Lord's will because it put money in every pocket, but that's neither here nor there. And then you've got one of those three men who was like in the court, like in the king's presence, working amongst the high officials, and was able to carry himself in status and stature. And yet all three, bring a message that none of us really want to receive. And Israel is and Judah they're both blind.
Yeah.
They're massively blind to what they're doing, and they don't realize what's coming.
Yeah.
And I think that in lies why we feel the sucker punch so bad when we read things, when we read what Hosea did, when we read the frustration that Amos had. All of a sudden it makes us go, oh, wait a minute. If I don't heed that warning for myself, then I'm going to be in a place where, God may not put me in physical exile, but what could he take from me, or what could he move? Or,
So here's one of the questions I've been asking myself a lot as I've been reading through this. And it is not a question of God's sovereignty, but it is just it's just I think they're written in a way to have us ask this question. At least that's how I feel as I'm going through it. And that question is, how much of this is God's specific doing versus how much of this is God allowing the consequences of their actions to take place. And maybe that's the same thing.
Yeah.
But I can look at what's going on in their history and what's in this writing, and I can go, the natural consequence and outcome of where they are going is what takes place.
Right.
Now, God is sovereign. And so I think, is that the prophets looking at it and going, look what God is doing because of what we've done.
Right.
But it's been a question I've been chewing on of like, okay, is God saying, you've done this thing and therefore I'm doing this thing? And part of that is in here. And then how much of it is God saying, you've done this thing and I'm going to come rescue you.
Right.
But you're going to experience the consequences.
Right.
It's kind of there's some play there.
And it may be another generation before I do the rescuing.
Right.
And that's a tough thing, looking at faithfulness. Just thinking about God's faithfulness and the fact that his mercies are new every day. I think it's probably wise if we pause and go to him.
Let's do it.
Father, you are wonderful and holy. I know I start there with you a lot, but it's a good reminder for me of no matter what's going on in my life, you really are wonderful. I've been resting a lot in the idea of your peace and provision in the midst of storms, and how it can be so chaotic around me, but yet you are this ever steady force. You are a raft or a buoy that I cling to out in the middle of the ocean when the storm is just raging, and yet you bring a moment of peace in the midst of all of it, and you let me know that there is hope and that you are leading and guiding, and not to focus on the storm, but to focus on you. And so, Lord, as we think about whether they are storms of our own making, whether they are just the natural storms that arise around us because the world is just an evil place, Lord, whatever it is, you are the same God yesterday, today, and forever. And so as we go through these prophets, as we dive into especially these three prophets, as we look at the history today, Lord, I pray you would begin to reveal yourself to all of us, just how you're moving in each of our individual lives, that you would make plain and clear the confession that we need to have, the things in our hearts that we're holding on to that need to be let go of, that we would rejoice in what you're doing and how you're moving, and that we'd bring honor and glory to you with everything that we do. So bless this conversation this morning. Bless those who are listening. God, you know their hearts, you know where they are, and just pray that, like us, they would learn a lot. And we know that they'll definitely have corrections for us when we get something wrong. But we just pray that you would lead and speak in only the way that you can through us. And all this we ask in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. So here's my take on how do we get into the minor prophets.
Okay.
I think we need to do some Old Testament history.
Oh, boy. We'd like to welcome you to the dry episodes.
Yeah.
For now till eternity, we will be doing our best to pour water in a desert.
I just try to make it to come out of a rock.
Well, don't smack the staff. Don't use the staff on it.
That's right.
Let
That's
God
right.
do it in His timing, in His way.
So now there's a lot of other people on YouTube and books that can do a much better job of diving into the intricacies of Old Testament history than we can.
Yes.
So go out and find those people. But I think we would do a disservice to getting into these books if we didn't at least take us back and kind of do the, what was it when we were when you were in school? You had the Cliff Notes.
Yeah, the Cliff Note version.
The Cliff Note version. So, I thought, okay, we could go back to the first set of kings. But then I think we're still going to miss part of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's go back to sitting at the base camp at Mount Sinai
Yes.
and what was going on there. So I think that's where we start.
Okay. So, how far back to Sinai? Is this still Moses coming off with the Ten Commandments, or is this kind of...
Yeah, so in my head, when I go to it, so God has rescued them out of Egypt.
Okay.
He sets them at Mount Sinai.
Right.
He is about to start making this covenant with them.
Mm-hmm.
Moses comes down, and what does he see?
He sees lewdness. Well, we didn't know if you were going to come back.
Right.
We didn't know what was going on. We were in the dark. So, and then his brother, who still yet becomes the Levitical priest. I love the statement, the whole, well, we just threw all this stuff into the fire and this calf popped out.
Yeah. Yeah. And what he tells them, what he tells the people is, I've made this golden calf, and this is Yahweh.
This is your God.
This is your God. So
amazing how he looked a lot like the Egyptian gods.
right, or the Canaanite.
The Canaanite, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like it's one of those things. What's around us? What do we know? Okay, the guy that helped get us out of here is gone.
Yeah.
And so, but it wasn't, when I look at that story, I don't see this extreme, I don't see an extreme adoption of Baal or name the Egyptian god, in the sense that it was, hey people,
Yeah.
this is Yahweh that saved you,
Yeah.
right? It's in as I in Jared's eyes when I look through that story, what I see is a people going, we know this God saved us.
Right.
He goes by Yahweh. He set us here. He was with it's Moses' God,
Yep.
and Moses is now gone. We don't know what it looks like. I've got to know what it looks like. And so what do? They revert to something they know
Yep.
and then give it the name of the entity that they think saved them.
And the ironic thing is that at the exact same time, Moses is up on the mountain getting, "You shall make no graven images."
Yes, right.
So he comes down, he busts the tablets. He's super frustrated, and I get it. Mel Brooks, in History of the World Part 1, comes down off the mountain as Moses. I know this is so sacrilegious, but with these with 3 tablets, he goes, "God has given us these 15," and one of the tablets falls and busts. "These 10 tablets," and I just that is in my brain.
It's stuck forever.
For some reason. I saw a clip of it the other day, and I was like, I think I watched that movie, I don't know, like 20-something years ago. Probably at a super inappropriate time in my life. Should never have ever seen the film. And, I've forgotten probably most of what's in it, but I just remember, I kind of remembered that part, and I saw a clip of it the other day, and I thought, that is so funny. But in the not making fun of it, I mean, Moses was ticked, and rightly so.
Yeah.
Because he had just received this holy message,
Right.
and probably was on was on that spiritual high fire,
Yeah.
right? So fervency is like erupting from him.
Yeah.
And he comes down and sees them literally doing everything he just wrote down not to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, you have this group of people, and then, so good number of people die.
Yeah, it's not pretty.
But God keeps his covenant.
A remnant.
Moses said, don't, he speaks up. Whoa.
Sorry, my fault. That was my foot. My foot did that.
He speaks up that God continues to work his covenant with them.
Yeah,
They get the tabernacle.
right.
They spend a lot of time in the desert.
Yes.
They conquer some surrounding nations,
Yes.
small kingdoms. They get into the promised land. Then there's a period of the judges. I've heard some people call it more like they were like kind of like tribal chieftains. And then the people decide,
We want a king.
we want a king.
Give us a king.
And so then you get Saul.
Yeah. And let's talk about that for a minute, right? Okay. Let's go a little bit 10 Commandments on this.
Okay.
You shall have no other gods before me. You shall have no graven images. A king in a lot of countries became a god.
Right.
You look at Rome, you look at Caesar elevating himself, the Caesars elevating themselves to the status of godship. Babylon, I mean, on and on we could go.
Yeah, and then the ones around them. So you got like Canaan, Moab.
Yeah.
What's one of the other ones? Is it
Goshen. Well, Goshen's back in Egypt, but you got Edom.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you've got all, at worst, the king was like a god.
Yeah.
At best, the king was the one that had ability to
Yeah.
get power or something from them.
Right, exactly. And so here's Israel basically saying, God, we reject you as king.
Yeah.
We want an earthly representative.
Yep.
And so who do they get? They get the one guy that's taller than everybody,
Right.
that's prettier than everybody. Okay, so modern music has done this, right? We grew up in an era when you could be butt ugly, right? The scrawniest looking thing on the face of the planet, but you made really good music. Like those musicians were talented. And we live in a world today where all you got to do is look pretty. We'll let a computer do everything else for you.
Yep. AI will write the song, and auto tune will make the voice right.
That's right. And then you provide the pretty face.
Right.
Eventually, AI is going to create the pretty face, and it won't even be a real person anymore anyway.
I know. I'm gonna mute myself real quick.
He's got to, Jared's got to fix. But, we have a natural tendency to worship what is beautiful. We have a natural tendency to be drawn to things that we perceive as precious. And so, and I think, or anyway, for me, where I'm interpreting a lot of this, as I go through these Old Testament prophets, in the midst of judgment, and I know this is a weird thing, it's just where I am in life. In the midst of the judgment that we're going to read about and these things that we're going to come up against, what is resounding to me is the beauty of God. And the fact that he literally has the power to do what he did with Noah, even though he promised he wouldn't flood it. We know that after the flood was over with, everything else is a fire judgment. I'm just waiting for like meteorites and everything else to like hit the ground and just blow this whole thing to smithereens.
Yeah.
And he doesn't. Like, I mean, it could be, it could have been like just one of the roughest, and humanity ceased to exist. And I, the Lord, your God, hit the reboot button again and fixed all of this once and for all. But I think that should show us how committed our God is to worshipers who freely come to him.
Yeah.
How strong that desire is for him to receive from us that free worship, not forced, not coerced.
Right. Well, and so we're gonna get there as you dive into Hosea even more, but I've been seeing the same thing, right? This idea that God in Hosea could have not just poured out his wrath or planned to pour out his wrath in the valley of Jezreel. Mm-hmm. Yet instead, he pours his wrath out on his own son.
Yeah.
And I'm jumping the gun there, but like there's the hope that is in these writings.
Yeah.
You can't not read them with that picture in mind of look how many places he could pour out his wrath and his righteous anger. And yet, instead, what a gracious God does is let the consequences of their actions take place, but not pour his wrath out on them.
Yeah.
And allow them and keep calling them to return.
Just the words of Paul are echoing in my head right now, for it pleased the Father that in him all the fullness should dwell. Like all the weight of the cross, all the weight of our sin, all the weight, it pleased God the Father to send his son to that death. And that's a baffling conversation that we will have one day. But I think that's going to continue to pop up. It has to.
Yeah.
Because we're going to see what the weight of judgment looks like,
right,
as we go through, or at least the warning of, hey, this is what's coming.
Right.
But here's a great thing about God. In the midst of warning after warning after warning, it's always cushioned by, but here's the hope that's coming. You're going to do this. You're going to go down this road, but I'm going to fix it.
Yeah.
I'm going to fix it. Would it be that you would heed the warning and turn your ways? I'm still going to fix it.
Yeah.
But it'd be a lot better.
Yeah. You
won't have to go through. But I think the Israelites are mostly like me, just stubborn, hard-headed people.
What was I reading in where it's like you're stiff-necked just like you're.
Yeah.
Where was that?
So
at?
my Old Testament professor, Dr. Gary Galliotti, used to say that Israel, so Jacob, gets the name Israel, and so he called him Coconut Head, old Coconut Head, because he was. I mean, right? But I mean, he shows that, that theophany moment when he's wrestling, this pre-incarnate form of Jesus out in the desert and like wrestles the God of the universe all night long and will not let go till he gives him a blessing and comes away forever maimed. Right? He's going to limp the rest of his life, but that man would not. Number one, how strong was he? I mean, I think, evolution is truly presenting itself in humanity because I think we're just weaker and weaker. True evolution is literally de-evolution, right? It's literally getting weaker and
the effects of sin in this world,
yeah,
right?
And I mean, if you really want a good definition of evolution, just look at humanity. As a guy and I were talking the other day, talking about testosterone, right? And the fact that, so here I am, 44 years old, right? Men my age today have the testosterone levels of 60-year-old men from like 10, 15 years ago.
Well, so as a society, that we're kind of off track, but it's as a society, we're sitting more.
Yeah.
We're working from offices more.
Yeah.
I mean, I just sit in a chair all day long. And so I try to, like, in between meetings, I'm like, I'm going to do 20 push-ups. Just I got to do something. I got to move. I got to do something, try to get out and do some exercise. I need to get back out in my weight room, but that's a whole separate topic of conversation.
You lost your workout partner.
Yeah.
Come back. I'll give him a hard time.
So, Saul.
Yes.
Not a good dude.
No.
So then there's a whole period of time when David is his musician and
comforter,
and then they're running around trying to kill each other.
Yeah, they're at enmity with one another.
And then because God has said David is going to be the king.
Right.
And then he does become the king.
Right. And then David's son Solomon takes over.
Yeah. So, but in both instances, all right, so we get David, who's referred to as the man after God's own heart.
Right.
Pretty high praise.
Pretty high praise.
Yet, he does stuff worse or just as worse as you and I, right?
Yeah.
I mean, neither one of us have sent somebody off to battle to get killed on purpose.
No, and neither one of us have stepped out on our wives with somebody else's wife.
Right. So, all that to say, the kingship isn't necessarily going great.
No.
And then they get Solomon. So I'm going to actually, if you want to flip our screen real quick, we're going to show off our technology here for a minute.
Ooh, look at there.
All right. So let me, oh no. The screen flipped worked. The mouse.
Did the mouse die out on you?
Anyways, I'm sorry for the technical difficulties, everybody. But on what is displayed on this screen is work from outer in. So purple, green, then yellow, and then the red outline. So
Right.
that is the kingdom under Saul in the purple.
Yes. So it's small.
Small. It's seated in Jerusalem. Let me make sure.
Yeah, you're right.
Seated in Jerusalem. I wish my mouse would work so I could point to. There we go.
There it goes.
So let me.
There, it woke back up.
There we go. So seated in Jerusalem.
Right.
And then David takes over, and when he takes over, all the green is his kingdom. And eventually, after some battles and during the fighting season,
Right.
The kingdom has control over the yellow, but it isn't necessarily the kingdom, but it's in their
So for those of you
territory.
listening, if you think about, like the West Bank and you think about like, what Israel looks like, under Saul, it's this kind of this little part kind of in the middle. Under David, it takes on the shape of what we know it to look like, plus a little bit further north.
Yep. Yeah. So you basically end up with what is then referred to in the New Testament as like Israel and Samaria.
Yes.
Yeah. And then, so David passes away. Solomon takes over as the king, and he solidifies all of that
Right.
as the nation and the kingdom of Israel.
Solomon is the only king to rule over the amount of lavishness that Israel sees.
Yes.
Like the height of it all.
Yeah.
Solomon's the only one who basically, David led it to be, Solomon kept it together.
Yeah.
and then it's over.
Yeah.
Because following Solomon, we then break up. So it's interesting because the United Kingdom, not the UK as we know it, but the United Israel
Right.
Kingdom, only sits under Saul, David, and Solomon. And then after that, Judah and Israel go to war with one another. So Judah is the southern kingdom.
Yes. And I'm going to pull, as you're talking, I'm going to pull up this other map.
Yeah. And Israel is a northern kingdom. Now, this leads us to the conversation that Jesus has with the Samaritan woman, because she says, well, your forefathers say that that worship is in Jerusalem down in the temple. We say that, worship is up here on this mountain. Where does this come from? Well, it comes from the fact that Judah is the southern kingdom all the way down at the bottom. It contained Jerusalem. And that's where the capital was, and then Samaria becomes the capital of Israel.
Yeah.
And that's why even in Jesus's day, even though the quote unquote civil war is over, there's still this hatred,
Yeah.
this disgust, because this civil war lasted like 300 something years, which is interesting, right? Because Israel, the northern kingdom, only really makes it from about 931 to 722. So it's a course of a little over 200 years. They are taken into captivity in 722. Judah doesn't fall into captivity till like 586.
Yeah. So what's interesting about their captivity, though, and so we have, and let me zoom out on this map a little bit so it kind of gives some perspective. So what's interesting about the captivity is that it's not just like an immediate, they're now part of Assyria,
Right.
right? It's kind of at first glance, it's, hey, Israel, let's have a partnership,
That's right.
right? And so then they're like, ooh, that sounds good because money, power, protection, I'll take that partnership. And then it slides into, now I'm paying my taxes to you, I'm doing this to you, and now I got taken over,
Yeah.
right? It's like this slope that happens to them
know-
versus just like come in and I'm burning everything to the ground and now you're mine. It was,
Yeah, since you're already paying us taxes, and since you're already letting us do this and that, and since we're already providing these services, it's probably just better that we come in and just take
Right.
over everything.
And so under the divided kingdom, and let me kind of paint the picture. Right? So under the United Kingdom, Saul, David, Solomon, all of this that's in the map was basically theirs.
Correct.
Plus, if you see where my mouse is going,
Yeah.
if you're watching the screen, and if you're just listening on the podcast, it extends north probably a couple hundred more kilometers.
Correct.
And then under the divided kingdom, that is lost. Assyria and some other nations encroach from the north to the south
Right.
and shrink down what is then Judah and Israel. And the other nations are still around them: Edom, Moab.
And to show the stark differences in these two kingdoms, Israel did not have a single king that was good. They were all evil. In fact, there's only one king, Jehu, started off kind of good, but then he ended up evil. And so literally Israel, and I think that's why they go, I mean, it's like 136 years. They go into full captivity 136 years before Judah does.
Yeah.
And I think it's just the evidence. Judah, on the other hand, where the temple was built, where everything was set up, check this out. So they had, I got to find it in my notes right here. They had more good kings than Israel, but there was still a lot that were evil. So check this out. Only five of their kings started and finished well. So they were good at the beginning. They were good by the end. 3 of them started well, but finished poorly. And this one baffled me. Manasseh started off evil, but by the end was a good king.
Turned out good.
And it's interesting. But, when you look at the beginning, when you look under the United Kingdom, Saul, if you want to say he started off good or with good intent, he finished evil.
Yeah.
Solomon, very much the same way. David starts off good and finishes good, but here's the deal. What happened in the middle?
Right.
So there is not one who comes out unscathed.
Right. So let's then switch over. And I was thinking we should start in 1 Kings chapter 12, but I actually am going to go to the end of chapter 11.
Okay.
So I love this is some of my favorite writing in, like, you read through the Kings. Now the rest of their life, it's already been written about, like, hasn't it?
Yeah.
So but anyway, so I'm going to quickly skim through some of chapter 11 because it talks about basically the downfall of Solomon. So Solomon turns from God. So I'm starting in 1 Kings chapter 11, and I'll read the first couple of verses just to explain, like, what's going on with Solomon.
Right.
Now, King Solomon loved many foreign women along with the daughters of Pharaoh, Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, Sidonian, and Hittite women from the nations concerning which the Lord had said to the sons of Israel, "You shall not associate with them, nor shall they associate with you, for they will surely turn your heart away after their gods." Solomon held fast to these in love, meaning he held fast to these women.
Mm-hmm.
He had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned his heart away. Just what God had warned him about.
I'm sorry. I'll laugh because every time I read that passage, now listen, I love my mother-in-law very much. She's a good and godly woman, but I just think, what man out there goes, I think I would like 700 mothers-in-law. Yeah, and the concubines, Mama's going to be speaking into that too. Petition him so you can become the queen.
Right.
I mean, you look at the Sons of Thunder. Even their mama was like, but Jesus, they need a prestigious place. Mamas love their babies, and mamas are always going to come to the defense of their babies, and and then especially grandkids come along and they can do no wrong.
Right. Yeah. So
no wonder his heart was turned.
Right. Well, so, I mean, just an insane amount, right? So very clearly, before we even get into the next path, well, actually, let me just read it. Okay, so when Solomon was old, and I'm in verse 4, let me highlight it for you real quick. When Solomon was old, his wives turned his heart away after other gods, and his heart was not wholly devoted to the Lord, or Yahweh, his God, as the heart of David his father had been. For Solomon went after Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and after Milcom, the detestable idol of the Ammonites. Solomon did what was evil in the sight of the Lord and did not follow the Lord fully, as David his father had done. Then Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the detestable idol of Moab, on the mountain which is east of Israel, and for Moloch, the detestable idol of the sons of Ammon. Thus also he did for all his foreign wives who burned incense and sacrificed to their gods. So, Solomon's slope, before these other gods, which we'll get into here in just a minute, about kind of some of the nasty detail. We've covered it a little bit, actually, in our Genesis.
Yeah, I think
a
so.
little bit,
Yeah.
and then a little bit in Ruth too, when we talked about Moab.
Right.
But his heart was already not devoted to God in his love for sex.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, very clearly, the reason you have 1,000 women living in and around your properties
Mm-hmm.
is not because he loved the conversation.
No.
I'm not trying to be crass about it at all, but
No.
he already had an idol on his heart.
Mm-hmm.
And so because his heart was not in the right place already,
Mm-hmm.
and he was idolizing and envying and worshiping a physical gift of God,
Mm-hmm.
it made his heart that much more susceptible to the further slip.
It was interesting to me in all this. He is literally the wisest man to have ever lived. And yet the wisest man to have ever lived still lived a life of rationalizing his sin.
Well, and at what point did he stop asking for the wisdom?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, and so that's a call to say in today's time, he had a hotline to Yahweh that we won't have, right?
Yes.
Like we don't have we don't have Yahweh, the creator God, coming down and going, Larry, quit doing that.
If only he would.
Right? I mean, but we do,
Yeah.
right? We do.
Yeah, God's word.
We have it, and so, but how fast would you or I slip away? How fast do we slip away when we stop picking that up?
Yeah.
We stop praying. We stop asking.
Yeah.
Because of you, I've been in this habit recently of starting my day off asking God, it's like, please help me have just a piece of wisdom in how I talk to my daughter, how I talk to my wife, and how I engage with work today. Because I'm at this point where I'm like, if I don't ask for it, I am going to explode at the moment something small happens, right?
Yeah.
Like the other day we had a food spillage in the living room, and she came in and said, I need help. I spilled yogurt on the carpet. I can't get it up. And like my immediate reaction is just
Yeah.
right. And you just like, because I'm at work, I'm in a meeting, and then she's like coming in and asking like, can you please help me with this? And I'm like, yes, just go in the living room, and I'm like, please help me, but if we're not asking those questions,
Right.
are we not just going to go with our first instinct, which is to just blow up, or or whatever some people's instinct is to just go and hide away, or whatever that is. And so, at what point did Solomon? He was asking. He was in communion.
Yep.
He was in communion with God. He was asking for the wisdom, and then he stopped.
The minute he sold his heart to the base things of life is the minute I believe the wisdom left. And I'm a full believer in the fact that God will take from you things. I think he does it. I think he does it in three ways. I think he takes something from you sometimes because you squander it. And that's probably the heaviest sting of them all. To go, I once was able to do this, but now I can do it no more. And because I have squandered it or whatever. He does it sometimes to wake you up to say, I have something different for you. This has got to go.
Yeah.
And that's a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah.
Sometimes he takes away because he's the God who gives and takes away. And he just, hey, it's time for that to be done. Let's just move on to this, It's not because he needs to focus us. It's just because, hey, this is plain and obvious. Oh, yeah, it's plain and obvious. Let's move over here.
Right.
And kudos to the person that can be in number 3. I've been in number 1. I have currently feel like I'm in number 2. I want to live in number 3.
Yeah.
But, and I think, Solomon did the same thing. We had this conversation a while back. We were talking about, some stuff in one of our transition ones. And I think I kind of left it hanging, kind of like back in the Bush Gore election, like a hanging Chad down in Florida. Sorry, that ages me a little bit. But I talked about how I really struggled at one point with the whole idea of, this idea of being filled with the Spirit daily. Because I'm like, we get the Spirit at the moment of salvation. So, he's in us. Why do I need to be filled? But I understand more and more what's being spoken of there. It's the idea, if you don't come back to the well and do the work of dropping the bucket down the hole, of feeling the weight of pulling that back up and then distributing that water where it needs to go,
Yeah.
you're not going to be sustained. It's not, drawing water from the well is not necessarily an action of luxury. It's an action of sustaining, of I need water, number one, to survive.
Right.
I need water so that, my mouth doesn't sound like,
Right.
when I'm talking in a microphone or whatever. Or I need water to cook with, or I need water to clean with. I need water for life.
Right.
I need the Holy Spirit for life. And if Larry doesn't take that time to go, okay, God, I need today a dose of this.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you what, weird prayer. I've never really prayed this a lot in my life, but I have been praying a lot recently, especially as I've gone into some meetings and some things. Lord, I need the wisdom of Solomon on this. I remember praying the morning that we did my mama's funeral. There was just some things that I knew I might have to deal with, or some things that I did have to deal with. And I was just like, Lord, I need the wisdom of Solomon. I need the wisdom of Solomon that wasn't the wisdom of, oh, look what I can get away with.
Right.
I need the wisdom of Solomon that says, hey, if I make this action, then the reality is going to come forth. And so, I've been leaning into that, and go back to and say the old King James way, ask, you have not because you ask not. And it's not a matter of, God, I want this to be this great person. I want this so that when I handle this situation, or I go into this situation, you're honored and glorified in this. And so it's different. I fail, we laugh about our producer sitting in here, but my son Andrew's in here, being very quiet and very patient. And probably the one person I'll lose it with the most in our household is him. And that's on me, because I either don't want to put up with it, either don't want to deal with it. I'm just, what am I doing? I am neglecting my call as a dad. I get so frustrated at him. I'm like, you need to control your emotions. And I'm like, okay, Larry, good job, Mr. Control Your Emotions, because you certainly aren't controlling yours. Great example, So, it's the whole do as I say, don't do as I do mentality. Right. Well, you never find that in Scripture anywhere. Right. And so it's a convicting thing. And it stinks when you have to look at your kid and go, okay, I messed up big time.
Yeah.
And I'm horrible at that. I'm horrible at being kind on the front end, and I'm horrible at going back and owning my mistakes on the back end. What does that say? That is the selfishness. That is the doing what's right in my own eyes.
And so, and that's the slide back into what happened to Solomon.
Absolutely.
Right? So, okay, he had this thing it's a natural desire, right? And he let it fester here.
Yeah.
Right. And then it grew and it grew and it grew and it grew. And then the next thing you know, he's building and worshiping places of worship for Chemosh, Molech, Ashereth, Milcom, which is, I think my research says that most likely it's just another form of Molech.
Yeah.
And then, so what do all those things have? Okay, so Chemosh and Molech, for sure, like it is proven in archaeology and our histories, for sure, child sacrifice.
Man.
Right.
And then temple prostitution is going to come in there.
And then Ashtaroth is the goddess of sex.
Right.
And so, but then, so you have child sacrifice in Chemosh and Molech.
Right.
But how do those people use those gods? they pray to them or they sacrifice to them in order to get power. So
Or in the case of Ashtoreth, they have sex with someone
for
power,
for power
yeah.
and fertility. So what I'm saying is, and I heard this. I have to go back and find the sermon. I'll send it to you. I don't remember who it was, but he was talking about these two gods as well. But the idea is, if you look around today, what do people go after? Sex and power,
Sex and power.
right? We read this and we go, that's crazy. But is it? Right? In cultural context, everyone around him, this was normal everyday behavior
Yeah.
because
They
they're
didn't think anything about it.
nothing about it.
And therein lies the damning argument against people in positions of power. And so this is that moment where we say, hey pastor, hey Sunday school teacher, hey church leader, hey dad,
You got to be so aware.
you have to be the one going against the grain.
Yeah.
You've got to be the one that society looks at and goes, wait a minute, why are you not like the rest of the dads? Why are you not like the rest of the pastors? Why are you not like the rest of the deacons? Because my line is going to be a biblical line.
Right.
And not Larry's line and what Larry wants. And so, so what do we call this? It's sanctification.
Yeah.
It's all this is. It's the art or the act of sanctification playing out in our lives. And what happens? Paul warned us about this, and he mentioned it, and he's 100% right. You're either going to feed yourself or you're going to feed the spirit that lives inside of you.
Yeah.
And what comes out is the one you've been feeding the most. I can tell you who's fat and sassy in my life.
Right.
I don't like it.
Right.
I don't like it at all.
So, all right, now let's fast forward a little bit.
Okay.
So if you want to flip the screen back over.
Solomon passes away.
Solomon passes away, and God had raised up an adversary named Jeroboam.
Right.
And Solomon kind of finds this out. So Jeroboam was in his court.
Right.
And then Jeroboam flees to Egypt. Now, what I find interesting about this whole thing is God raised him up. God told him what he was going to do, which leads me to this questioning of where was Jeroboam's heart at the start of this? I don't know. It doesn't really tell us. So we can ponder that. But and God promises Solomon, that because of his dad, he's not going to rip the kingdom out of his hands. It's going to be ripped out of his son's hands. So Solomon's son gets the kingdom taken away, save 2 tribes.
Rehoboam, yeah.
And so those 2 tribes become Judah.
Right.
And then Jeroboam takes the other 10
Right.
and starts Israel. And so this is where you get Jeroboam rules. But so my question about where was his heart at the beginning, because God raised him up to be the one that takes over. I don't know, but let me look. So I don't know, within the first moments of his kingdom, if you start I'm in 1 Kings 12 and then verses 25, immediately starts building temples or setting up worship to other gods.
Right.
And part of this is out of fear of, right here, right? The kingdom will return to the house of David if this people go up to offer sacrifices in the house of the Lord, right? So
Yeah.
his brain is already twisted to this idea that it's about sacrifice. It's about worship in the temple. And so because of that, I need to set up temples here
Right.
to get them into it.
Yep. I need to move it here.
And so I bring that up. Why do we bring all of this up? To get into the minor prophets. Well, throughout the minor prophets, you're gonna hear about Jeroboam's sin, right? And then specifically when we get into Hosea, we're at Jeroboam 2,
Right.
and then Hoshea, which is the end of the divided kingdom time
Right.
period. But they keep referring back to Jeroboam's sin. Well, what is Jeroboam's sin? Well, actually, it's Solomon's sin too, right? All the way through, these kingdoms start to look exactly like the people around them. And they set up these idols in their heart and on their land. And they turn from God, knowing what he's done, and worship something that is, well, number one, not the creator God, but number two, detestable in what they ask of its worshipers.
Right. That is what I really think is a big warning for the church today too. Number one, how do we skate this fine line of being in the world but not of it? How do we go to where what we would call sinners are,
Yeah.
but not be impacted by their sin? And, Jesus masterfully was able to sit at the table and sup with sinners and tax collectors and whatever else, but yet never fell prey to their vices. And I think that's the tough world that we live in. And I think one of the greatest definitions of liberty in Christianity that I've ever heard somebody say, it's not what I'm allowed to do because of my liberty in Christ, it's what I'm willing to give up because I have liberty to do that in Christ. And that says a lot. It says a whole lot. And, so that's where I think the church today, we have done a lot to make our sanctuaries look like the world. We've done a lot to make our music relevant and sound like the world. We've done a lot to make our sermons and our stage presence feel and sound like the world. We've done a lot to make our organization flow and function in this corporate efficient way that looks like the world. No.
Right. Yeah, I can, that sentiment that Jeroboam had, they're going to go back and they're going to go back to the house of David. It's not that far of a stretch to go. If a person loves power, and I'm not indicting anyone that we know, I want to make that clear, but it's more about like, think about these mega churches, right? How often is it in there and going through is the conversation like, I can't teach the real gospel. They probably don't even know what the real gospel is at this point in some of them, but I can't teach the real gospel because they're going to understand that what is being brought here isn't
Right.
that. They're going to go back to the house of David.
Yep.
Right.
Which means I'm going to lose money.
Right.
I'm going to lose influence. I'm going to lose book deals.
Right.
I'm going to lose
Power.
Yeah.
Power.
Yeah.
But we could just as easily be in that same boat, right? So, actually, let's read through the slow decline.
Okay.
So let me flip us back over. I've now jumped to 2 Kings 17.
Okay.
So this is the very, very end of the northern nation of Israel.
Okay.
Last king they had was Hoshea, not Hosea, Hoshea.
Right.
And he's been captive to Assyria, and now we get this commentary on why Israel fell.
Right.
So verse 7, 2 Kings 17, verse 7. Now this came about because the sons of Israel had sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them up out of the land of Egypt from under the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and they had feared other gods. And they walked in the customs of the nations whom the Lord had driven out before the sons of Israel, and in the customs of the kings of Israel which they had entered introduced. So slippery slope, right? So the slow decline. The sons of Israel did things secretly which were not right against the Lord their God. So it didn't start out like in every single home as this blatant thing, right?
Right.
Did things in secret. Then they built for themselves high places in all their towns, from watchtowers to fortified cities. So they're doing things in secret, and now they're leaning on themselves for protection and not in the protector.
Right.
Then they set for themselves sacred pillars and Asherim on every high hill and under every green tree. So now the idol worship is starting to become public. And there they burned incense in all the high places, as the nations did, which the Lord had carried away to exile before them. And they did evil, provoking the Lord. They served idols, concerning which the Lord had said to them, "You shall not do this thing." And the Lord warned Israel and Judah through all his prophets and every seer, saying, "Turn from your evil ways and keep my commandments, my statutes, according to all the law which I commanded your fathers, and which I sent to you through my servants, the prophets." Here's where it was. I was like, where did I read that? However, they did not listen, but stiffened their neck like their fathers, who did not believe in the Lord their God.
Yeah.
We have a visitor that opened up the studio.
This is a studio. I thought this was the back bedroom.
It's both. You're giving away our secrets.
Yeah, don't tell our secrets, our secret cave. Well, we do. We are stiff necked like Israel. Many times we are stiff necked when we don't want to let go of selfishness.
That's right.
And it's such a slow thing. And then one day you wake up and you look around and you go, how did I get here? We know exactly how you got there.
Yeah.
You know exactly how you got there.
But how often, right, are we doing things in secret?
Yeah.
And so a year of doing that in secret turns into 5 years later, I'm not so ashamed about it.
Right.
I don't really see myself living in some weird way.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but that's kind of the capstones
Right.
of this divided kingdom, all the different kings, what's taking place. And that is for me, the historical and then the literary setting for where are these prophets coming from?
Yeah.
What are they telling us?
Right.
It's this idea of you've got something else sitting. I'll go back to the Tozer, A.W. Tozer. Sorry. I'm hearing piano in the other room. I'm like, what is that? Okay. The Tozer quote that I had from a few weeks back.
Right.
There is something, what else is sitting on the throne in your heart? There's only room for one.
Right.
And whether it's there in secret or it's there out in public, if there's something else sitting on that throne, the eventual slide ends you up in exile.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It really does. So as you guys can see, there's a lot of spiritual application to this. These small prophets are actually mighty in stature and mighty in lessons. And so don't shrug them off as, well, that's just Old Testament stuff. No. This is real deal things we are dealing with at this very day, things that you're dealing with and I'm dealing with in our own lives.
Yeah.
So we need to take heed. We need to lift our eyes up. We need to open our ears. We need to say, okay, Lord, what do I need to learn here?
One last little piece of commentary.
Yes.
If you read a lot of the commentators and the writers on these things, I tend to agree with. I don't like the term minor prophets.
Yeah.
Right, because it makes them seem like they're insignificant.
And they're not. Right.
I think it's about the time period, right? Because it's not this unified kingdom. There's tend to be smaller collections of writings, and
right.
in the Jewish tradition, these are 12 parts of one book. And so they call it like the book of 12
Yeah.
or the 12 prophets.
Yeah.
Something like that.
And how many tribes were there in Israel? And how many disciples were there? Interesting.
Anyways, I might start referring to it as that because I just feel like we're
The
doing
12.
The 12.
The 12.
We're giving them a disservice when we call them like, oh, you're the minor insignificant.
The
prophets.
12, not the ones you're thinking of. There's the title of our first book.
There you go. Written by ChatGPT.
That's right. Oh my goodness.
All right. So, hey, one last thing, Larry, you're going to close us in prayer. I'm just
Okay.
volunteering you.
Okay, I
But,
got voluntold.
hey, producer, hold this up in front of the camera so we can show people.
Yeah. Yeah. Any one
see.
of them. There we go. That's good.
If
Yeah.
you guys want a sticker, email us and we'll figure out some way to get them to you.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll be
We
glad
got we got some stickers. They're pretty cool. If you want one, email us. We'll get them to you. Follow us on all the social media stuff.
Yeah.
Go check out our new YouTube channel. This episode will be up there today. If you're listening and didn't watch, you can go see how we look.
Yeah. We're going to go see how we look.
That's
And
right.
I don't really want to see how I look. I know how I look.
I know I don't listen to us at all because I'm like, I don't want to listen to my own
It's
voice.
funny. So this morning we're getting ready to leave, and we tried recording that promo video, and then we had issues with things, and I threw a T-shirt on and heading out the door, and producer was like, "Dude, what are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm throwing a T-shirt on." Look at the T-shirt you're wearing. I was like, "Oh yeah, you're right." So I went and grabbed a polo and slid on. I was like, "Okay, it's not. It's not that we don't want you guys to know where we live. We just don't want you guys to know where we live."
Exactly. I mean, it's like 90% of the people know us very well, so it's
Yeah.
not like it's a surprise, but the hope is eventually that this conversation about the gospel goes to more people.
Yeah.
And in that sense, they don't necessarily need to know where my daughter goes to school.
That's right. That's right. It's a protection
That's
thing.
right.
But if you want to know more about Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, if you want to know more or have any questions for Jared and I, the sharpeningpodcast@gmail.com, please email us. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, all the places. One of these days, we're going to be able to hire one of these kids to be like our social media guru.
That's right.
We're just two old guys trying to make a living in this world. So be praying for us and our poor families that we drag through
right.
our insanity. So let's pray together. Lord, thank you for today. Thank you for this time together, and thank you for just the excitement and the hope and the love that you have shown us through your Son, Jesus Christ. I pray we not take for granted what you give us. I pray that we not look past the love and encouragement you have for us. And I pray that you would open our minds and our hearts to hear what you are trying to tell us from your word, and that we would take heed the warning, and that we would willingly follow you, even though that means it's going to be some rocky, rough terrain. Your path is still the best, and your way is still right. And we're going to learn a lot along the way. So, Father, teach us, be glorified in us, and Lord, just lead in every single one of us. And all this we ask in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.